All right, so our next assignment in here is going to be a product rendering that we're going to be doing. So this is an example of one. This is, we got the essential oil diffuser up here, so I thought that would be kind of like a good project to use. I'm going to be providing the assets for this one, so when you get to that point of needing it, you can definitely use it. If you want to do something else, you can do something else, but keep in mind your ability to create your own textures for that kind of thing, and your ability to create it so that it looks like a product, because it's very easy in something like this to make it look too blobby or whatever. So the first thing you want to do with anything like this is always get reference, and that's what I talked about 2 weeks ago, not last week. So oil diffuser, spell oil right. Oops. Oh my gosh, there we go. It is. So look at different references that are out there. Okay, don't go crazy. Like this would be a crazy design to try to do on your first time. So the easier one, something like this, that would be, if you're going to do the oil diffuser, that would be the way to go, okay? Even something you may find simple like a pop can. The can shape itself is very easy to do, but when you get into the top mechanics of this and actually building the tab and actually building the indents and stuff, that area gets very difficult to do, okay? And if you're trying to make it look realistic, which is what we're trying to do, don't do a can, okay? You can do a bottle. And that'll work, okay? So just like before on our assignments, our first step is always going to be to duplicate our template project. So I duplicated it, I renamed it product. I set my preferences to under files, there it is. To my product. If you have something like, let's say I'm doing a beer bottle, let's say I'm doing a can, because I didn't listen to my instructor and I want to do a can anyway, or I'm doing something else, find an image of it from the side view. So just as an example, like I did the oil, essential oil, side view. You want to find something that's like a side view profile of it. This is even something that you could grab as a picture of if you have at home. Just take a snapshot with your phone. Ideally, what we're looking for is just what does it look like from the side, okay? And I'm going to make a new document here just so we can see this from the start. So I'm going to go to my front view. So I just middle click, if you remember the middle click thing. I can go up to options. I'm going to go to configure. And then under here, I can load in an image. So if I downloaded a picture, and this one, oops, it's under reference. This one is a beer bottle that I downloaded. So this is, again, just a side view of a product. You can offset it. Anytime you model anything, keep it lined up with that green arrow, like that's your center line. And then this red line is the ground. So I always like to make sure I build things right off of that. It makes your life easier when you get further along. All right, so that's pretty close. Maybe a little bit left that way, okay. All right, so now the way we're going to build this is going to be using a different method than we've built stuff in the past. So when we built our room, when we built our buildings, we started off with basic shapes like cubes and cylinders and whatever else. Definitely a possibility. We could do that. With this one, we're going to start off with what are called splines. Splines are essentially curves, okay? So if you think of just like a pen tool type of thing, that's what we're going to be using. So if I go down to the pen under spline, I can use the pen tool. I would recommend go off to the side and just practice with the pen tool because it is a bit different than Illustrators and Photoshops. Especially because if I control click on one of these points after, you'll see that it broke it, but then I could rejoin it and then, it does weird stuff after, okay? So I recommend just kind of playing with it a little bit before you get any further. I'd also recommend, just like when you were in Photoshop or Illustrator first, don't worry about trying to fix the path as you're going. Just draw it out first and then come back and tweak the points. It makes it a bit easier. So what we're going to be doing is drawing the profile of this thing. So we're not drawing the thickness of it. All we're doing is just drawing what it looks like from the side. And there's a cap on this right now. We're imagining that the cap is off because that would be a separately modeled piece, okay? So this picture is pretty horrible, but I know what this looks like. So I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to go a bit out and give it some roundness. And just like Photoshop or Illustrator, I'm just clicking and dragging. I'm going to go in, click and drag a little bit. I'm going to go out, click and drag a little bit. Go in, click and drag a little bit. All right, so there's the ridges that are at the top. Then I'm going to come down here and click and drag a bit there. You don't want to just click on any points. If you create any sharp ones where it's just like a click, it looks pretty horrible when you render your stuff out. So I'm going to go there. I'm going to come down here. Now when I get to the bottom, I need to have this rounded and go inward. And if you, I don't drink beer, but I'm assuming it's like other bottles where the bottom of it is like caved in a bit, right? So there's a little dimple so that they can cheap you out of an ounce of beer, half an ounce of beer. So I'm going to drag this in like that, and then drag this over like that. Okay, now once I get to the end, I just switch my tool. So I just go to the Move tool, and then I'm out of the Spline Drawing tool. And then I can click on the points, and then move them around. Okay, now it's hard to see with the image on here. So if I go back to my options, go back to my configure, I can just say Show Picture to turn that off. Okay. I mainly use that picture as a starting point. Once I have my starting point, then it's a lot easier for me just to go through and just put the points where they need to be and adjust them. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. This point right there, I'm just going to tweak a bit. I just want to make sure this is straight. If this goes like that, that's going to look weird when it creates it. So I'm just going to flatten this out so that's nice and smooth. It comes into a nice smooth corner there. That's nice and smooth there. This point needs to be right at that green line, okay? Because what's going to happen is it's going to revolve, and if it's not on that green line, it's going to have a hole right at the bottom, and we don't want a hole in the bottom of our bottle. So the easiest way to do that is using the snap. So if I go here to the snapping stuff, and I enable snap first, and I usually pull this tab off because of how horrible this snapping is. You have to like click so many options. So I'm clicking on the enable snap, work plane, grid point, and grid line. Now I can just drag this over, and you'll see how it snaps right to that green line. There we go. Okay. So now I have this starting here. It dips down below the line. That's fine. It comes up. There's that part. Here's this part. If I need to adjust this, you know, maybe I'll turn my snap off. And then just tweak that a little more rounding. I don't like how this is so wobbly here, so maybe I'll pull in that just to sharpen it some. I'll flatten this out like that a bit. That a bit. There we go. All right, so I'm satisfied with the shape of that. I can come back and adjust it later, but that's my starting point. So now I'm going to go back to my perspective view, and now what I need to do is tell Cinema to take this curve shape and actually build a surface around it. So under the subdivision surface here, if you remember, there was an extrude we looked at before, and I showed the lathe and loft and sweep and all these before. We're going to use the lathe one. And it works just like the subdivision surface. The lathe has to be on top, and then the spline would be underneath. So if I click the lathe and drop the spline into it, you'll see how it creates that surface. It's taking that curve, and it just like a lathe, just like spins it around. So then I'm going to inspect the surface. I'm just going to make sure that nothing looks out of place or odd. That looks fine there. Coming up here, that looks fine. Coming up here, that looks fine as well. Okay? So regardless of what kind of surface you're creating, it should be something that is simple and round like this, and can be created that way. Okay? Now for my essential oils one, I did the exact same thing. I went to that spline tool. I drew in an image. When you get to a certain point of skill, you don't need to worry so much about bringing in images because you can really look at the surfaces and just know what they're going to do. So these bottles are very narrow in neck. Like there's not much going on up here. zoom in a bit. There we go. Okay, so I switch my tool, and then I can adjust it as needed. Okay, now the process is again the same. I could just go to that lathe, make sure I'm just clicked on the one spline, hold Alt, and click the lathe, and then there is that oil. Now I made this one a bit bigger than it needs to be just to show how we can update the shapes of things, okay? So in this case, obviously this is like a ridiculous proportions. I can go to that spline, I can jump back to this view, I can go to the points of the spline, and if I grab on the points here, and then move them over, I can adjust what the shape of that's going to look like. And so I can create something that looks closer to the shape that I obviously originally intended. If I get something weird like this, it's just because of the handles. You'll see there's no point right there. There's a point here and a point there. So then I would just go through and just tweak these handles to help smooth out that shape. Okay, so when you do this, look at the shape of your surface. So something like that is weird because there typically isn't a dip in the bottles. Typically, they're nice and smooth from one transition to the other. So like that. And then this point here would probably be in a bit more. Oops, make sure I grab the arrow. Now the other thing that I'm not doing is moving these points in the Z direction. Okay, so I'm basically just moving these in the up and down and left and right, the X and the Y. I think I need to squeeze that one in just a bit more. Come on. There we go, something like that. And then maybe pull that. There it is. Pull that handlebar in a bit more. Oops. And you'll see that I actually did like scoot it over somehow. Well, with the handlebar. Let me just move that back in. There we go. And then I'm going to switch back to this view just so I can make sure I get this straight. There we go. So that looks much better. Okay, so there's my little bottle of stuff. Okay, and it's not so important that the bottle looks exactly the same as, you know, what you intended it to for this specific instance. You can see this bottle is pretty square shaped. This one is kind of rounded up here, and it's a bit fatter and whatever else, okay? For what we're doing with this, it's fine to have stuff like that, okay? Cool. So once you're happy with the shape of it, I always duplicate it. So I'm going to label this first. So this will be my oil bottle original. I'm going to hold down Control, drag it, and then just hide the original one. Because this one I want to hit C on so that I could then go through and edit the points, okay? Now you'll notice where the points get divided on here of where it actually creates points on the surface are relating to this original shape. So let me delete that again just so we can see this happen. Oops. On here, on this lathe operation, there's a couple things that we could play with. We don't need to play with the angle, that's fine. We could play with the subdivisions. We could play with the subdivision isoparms, which is going the other direction. Or not. We could also do caps on this. This really shouldn't have any caps on it at all anyway. And that should be good. There's also on the spline itself, if I turn on my wireframe, this is a Bezier spline, which is what it created. And then these are where it's creating points. So right now it's adaptive. So if I set it to none, it would literally do just points where I've clicked points. So any of the smoothing that I did is gone. If I switch this to natural, it'll smooth it out in a more natural way. You can see there's more divisions here, or less divisions here, but there's more along this than there were before. If I go to uniform divisions. If I go to adaptive, that's what it was on. And if I go to subdivided, it'll do that, okay? So when you're looking at this kind of thing, time we model something, we want to find the least amount of divisions while still maintaining that shape. So in this case, I'm going to go with the adaptive. But I'm going to play with my settings here to see if I need all those. Oops. Yeah, I think 10 is probably good. That gives me enough divisions going up like this, but not like a crazy amount. All right, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to hit C on my lathe, and now I have a good amount. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cap. And I could create the cap the same way that I just did that. I could make a spline and then do a lathe around that too. The process is exactly the same. You draw what the shape is going to look like, and then you lathe it, and then boom, you have it. I'm going to show a different way just so you can see a different way. I'm going to make a cylinder. I'm going to shrink it down to fit. I'm going to go to my modeling mode so I can shrink this down. Move that down. That looks like an appropriate size right there. And it would actually be, what, like right there-ish, let's say. Okay. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go to, I'm not going to do any caps on this one. I'll take care of that after. Okay, so I'm going to turn my caps off. There we go. I'm going to hit C on it. And then I'm just going to go to my curves here. Come on. And I'm going to right click and then just say close polygon hole. Okay, because the bottom doesn't need to be closed, the top needs to be closed. And now that the top is closed, now I can use that edge to add a bevel. So if you remember, MS is our bevel hotkey. And then I could add some divisions in there to smooth it out. Okay, now whenever we're doing a product, anything that we model, we want to have divisions, or we want to have bevels pretty much everywhere. So even though this bottom piece, we're not going to see it too much, I still want to have something there. So I'm going to use my closed polygon hole. There we go. So I'm going to close that off. I'm going to bevel it. And then I'm going to delete this bottom face. Okay, and that gives me just the ability to have a bevel right there. If I didn't have that closed face, I couldn't do the bevel. So that looks pretty good. I may also want to do, if you've looked at caps before, sometimes they have this like little indent in them, like that. That might be kind of like a neat little touch that I add to it. And when I do, again, I'm just going to add a bevel right along here, just a small one. And then right along this area, I'm going to use my select loop selection, and then add a tiny bevel right there. All right, so that's good the way that looks. Oops, I messed something up here. You can see this line. I think I must have double-clicked that and added a bevel where I shouldn't have added a bevel. Yep. Let's try that again. Always address your issues right away because it's very difficult to go back and fix it if you've done something wrong. Yeah, so for whatever reason, I click on this, and it's grabbing these two edges going down this way. And I'm not sure why it's doing that. So I'm just going to switch to my move tool. I'm going to deselect that edge by control double-clicking it. And then I'll just shift-click that one and make sure there's no other ones. Yep, see the other side did the same thing for some reason. There we go. Cool. All right, so there's my bottle. Now, if you have ever owned anything like this, I'm sure you've seen that the bottles, the caps are not just a cap like this. Usually there's like a breakaway part, like your milk container, where there's like a little tab that holds it in place, and then as you turn it, that little breakaway tab comes off. So I'm going to make a little breakaway tab by copying this, and then just deleting this top face, and then just sizing it down. So I'm going to grab the points, that maybe. And that will make it look like there's a little breakaway tab right there. Cool. Okay. So that's how I modeled that bottle. So you can start off modeling just the main items that you're going to be doing in this. Now they have to have some sort of Photoshop label, texture, something on there. So this bottle will have a label on the bottle. So that's one of the things that I want to make sure we have with this assignment. Let me grab my stuff and just kind of organize it a bit. So here's all my bottle, oil bottle. I'm going to move the pivot, so I hit L, I move the pivot to like the bottom, and then I slide it back down to the ground. So remember, L is our pivot tool. I can just use that to move that. Okay, and we're not going to get into the rendering part of this today, but we will get into the texturing part. So I'm just going to make some textures for what this is going to look like. So this will be my glass bottle. In order for this to look like glass, it should have transparency. That's a gimme. If we go to the refraction presets, we can choose glass from the list. And then when we render this, you'll see how it kind of looks like glass, but not really looks like glass. So there's a hint of glass there. One of the things that's going to really make this look like glass is thickness. Right now, it's paper thin going all the way around it. So we should add some thickness to it. One way to add thickness to a surface is to just extrude it. So we've done that before. We have a window or whatever it is, and we just extrude it a little bit, and that gives us thickness. The other way to do that, a little bit more procedurally, is if I find that shape, which is right here, I go under my simulate cloth, I can do what's called a cloth surface. And don't ask me why this is even under here, except for, I use it more for modeling than I do for cloth. But it allows me to use the cloth surface, the oil bottles underneath it, and then I can add a thickness to this. So very easily, I just hit a button and then it has thickness. And I'll probably put this to -0.5 because that seems more appropriately sized for that. Okay, so now this is going to look a bit more like glass than that did. This is very opaque in the middle. This feels a little bit more like glass. It's still not going to feel perfectly like glass until we get an environment in there. In order for glass to look like glass, we see through it, and the environment that's around it is actually distorted inside the glass. We also have reflections that are inside the glass. So you can actually see a hint of the glass looking good right here, where this surface is like existing. So I'm going to go up to where we did the floor before, and I'm going to add a sky. Okay, now the sky is not going to be a sky. We're going to create a material that we can drop onto the sky that will give it the appearance of having an environment in there. And I believe I've shown these before. If not, then just go with me. So there's a website called HDR SIBL, which is Sybil Archive HDR Labs. You can get to it that way. And these are all different environments where you can put your glass basically, or use it for reflections or use it for refractions. So you want to find something that has some nice coloring to it. You could also use stuff like this or things down there. HDR Labs. I always just do HDR Labs SIBL and it takes you right to where the downloads are. You could also just do a search for free HDRs because that's what we're after. We're after these things called HDRs, which are basically reflection maps and refraction maps. Now, some are pay ones, like this website has some free ones and it has some pay ones. But if you look at these, this is basically just a 360, okay? There's a lot more information in there than just a 360, but that's the gist of what it is just that 360. So you want to find one of these images and download it. You should have a file that's called a .hdr file. So I've downloaded one and put it inside my folder. So I'm just going to make a new material, turn off the color, turn off reflection, and on my luminance, I'm going to connect that texture. Apparently I didn't put it in the same folder though. P drive there. the files are typically big, so I keep them in other folders too. So there's one of, this is downtown LA. Did it open? There it is. So there's one of downtown LA, you know, with the skyline in there. I could use that. You'll see that says .hdr. That's the one you want to use, okay? I also have these studio ones, which are basically just like if you were going to shoot a photo of something in the studio, there would be like lights in the front and then reflection cards and stuff like that. So people actually take HDRs of those areas. Ideally, whatever environment you want it to look like the object is in, that's the HDR you would take. So if I wanted to have a piece of glass sitting on this table and look like it's sitting on this table, I would take an HDR of this area right by the table. And then I would use that to feed the reflections and refractions of the glass. You'll see in a second how this is going to work. So I'm going to grab just this Studio HDR one. I'll grab a couple of these actually. Let me just grab that. There we go. And I'll just drop these into my textures folder. And I'll just grab number 7. Okay. And you can see the little image of what this looks like. It's basically just like lights around the room. And that's all I should have to do. Okay. And then I just drop this onto my sphere. And it looks pretty hideous to actually you know, render your scene with this in there. So typically I like to turn that off so that it doesn't render the scene with these reflections in the background. Okay, so I'm going to right click on the sky and add a compositing tag and just say that it's not seen by the camera. So what that means is it's going to do reflections, it's going to do refractions. We just won't see the actual image in the background. That's it. So now when I do my rendering for this, this glass is going to look a lot more like glass, okay? Because now we have something feeding some sort of environment into it. So there's the before, kind of ugly. There's the after, okay? So you can see that looks a lot more like glass would look. So I'm going to go back to my glass bottle, and then I can start to tweak what this looks like. If I look, do I have my bottle in here? I do. So this bottle here is like a yellowy, browny kind of color. So that's what I want to emulate. If I go to my transparency, this is how the transparency works. There is a color up here that I can pick. That color is also these sliders. Okay, so if I hit this, that goes away. And that's all over Cinema. If you look, there's little sliders that you can open up. There's also a brightness. So if I pull this brightness down, that's essentially cutting off the transparency of it, okay? If I pull the value down, that also cuts off the transparency. So I have to be careful with the color I choose because I don't want to eliminate the transparency totally. I want to make sure I have transparency, but it's colored, okay? So I'm going to go and find this kind of browny color here. Now, a second ago I turned on the value and we lost some of that transparency. It'll do the same thing. As I pull this down, you'll see how we lose some of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow some of the color from the color, and that will help give us the actual color of the item, okay? And here, this doesn't affect the transparency. This is only reflecting the actual color of the glass. So in 2 spots, transparency and color, we can kind of hone what this is supposed to look like. Okay, now I'm going to pull down the transparency slightly like that. I'm also going to go to my reflection and change this from specular to Beckman. Pull the roughness down a bit. If you're not sure what roughness values or anything like that, if you look at the item and you're looking at the reflections, look at how clear they are. If the reflections are like crystal clear, like a mirror, there's very little roughness. If the reflections are very like spread out, then it's very rough, okay? So this one, they're pretty sharp. So I'm going to go with maybe like an 8 on the roughness. I'm going to add a bit of reflection in here, like 7. And then on my transparency, I'm going to leave it just like that for now. Okay. Now once we start adding some of this color, once we start adding some reflection, once we start adding these, not advanced features, but just more realistic features, it's going to start slowing down our station. My last render took 1 second for this. Now that we've changed a few things, it's still rendering. Okay, so don't be surprised if it does take a few seconds or even a minute to render this out. Now, one thing I can do to speed this process up is in my render settings, I can make sure that I'm rendering at a lower size. The smaller the size, the faster it's going to go. So I'm just going to cut these two numbers in half, because I don't care about the size right now. I just care about getting something that I can visualize. So it's almost done, so I'll just let it finish. But that's looking more realistic. There's no lights, actual lights in the scene right now, so I'm fine with the way that's looking at the moment. And then we'll tweak it afterwards. Okay, so that looks good enough for glass. Now watch how. So I'm going to leave everything as far as location exactly where it is. Watch how just changing that HDR will change what this image looks like. So that was number 7 that I used. Here's 15, which is a lot. The light's basically up top, and there's more of an environment on the bottom. Okay, so just changing what HDR is feeding into this will change what our reflections look like, will change what our refractions look like, and it'll change the look of the glass. And just like the 2 seconds of rendering that's already been done, come on. I'm going to set this one to A, I'm going to go here, set this one to B, and then I want to see an A. Come on. Compare. Why aren't you comparing A and B? Maybe because they're different sizes and like it. Well, anyway, you can see the definite difference. So this is a lot darker up here now, and it's a lot lighter and softer down there. Same thing here. The lights are now going this way. So choosing an HDR is something that is really important. You can't just go out there and grab any one and throw it in there and expect to get good results. You have to really kind of sometimes play around with it to get the results you're looking for. Now, I know that on this one, I actually like having the darker glass up top like this. There's a label that's going to be wrapped around that, so I'm not concerned too much, because if this is a little bit lighter, that's fine. I'll have a label that goes around it. So I'm just going to leave it like that for now. I'll adjust it later. Okay? Whenever you do lighting, modeling, anything like this, don't think of it as I need to get the material to look perfect before I move on to the next step, because the next step will add something else to your scene, which will make you go back and tweak what you've already done. So the first thing you want to do is just here's my model, here's a basic texture, here's a basic label, then we move on to the next item and then do the same thing, the next item and do the same thing, the next item and do the same thing. The last day of this assignment, you'll spend tweaking values, just going through and tweaking your HDR, tweaking your lights, tweaking positioning, tweaking cameras, tweaking whatever, okay? So don't try to get everything to be perfect right away. And the cool thing about doing something like this, where you have a collection basically of oils or a collection of something, is this one here, if you were to look at it, it's essentially the same exact label on every single bottle, except the image and the name is different. So I could actually create 50 of these and update 2 things on each label and have every one look different. If you did like a Coke can and a Sprite can, well, now you have 2 completely different labels pretty much, right? Because they're designed differently. All right, so now to create the label, I want to actually build what the label would be. A label would be a piece of paper that's stuck to the outside of this, okay? Now, I'm going to ignore the fact that this one has a little opening right here. Don't worry about that. I'm just going to wrap it all the way around. It's also not perfectly lined up, but just ignore that also. So I'm going to go to my original bottle surface, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm just going to pull it out of there for a second. I also want to isolate it just so I don't get confused as to what I'm doing, so I'll say solo single. And what I want to do is basically delete everything that is not the label. So the label is going to wrap around right here. So if I go to my faces, and I grab, let me just hit tolerance selection on. There we go. I grab those faces right there, and then I say select invert. Now I can just delete all those faces, and now I'm left with just my label, okay? Now in order to get the label to be not in 3D, we can have one surface right here and another surface like literally lined up with it. We can't have that. I need the other surface to be just a hair above it, so I need to either scale it so it's a little bit bigger, or I can do some other stuff, but scaling it is going to be the easiest one. So I'm going to go to scale, I'm going to go back to my object mode. I'm going to look for my scale manipulator. Now that's way down there, that's not going to work. I can't just scale it there because it'll make it like taller too. So under my mesh axis center, there we go, I just hit execute. And now I should be able to just scale this up. Now I'm not going to scale it up this way. I'm just going to grab the green and just scale it out a hair, like that. Okay, now I can drop that back into my oil bottle and relabel this to be oil bot label. Or just label because there's only one label in there. Cool. All right, so now let me drop a material on here. As I do that, notice here I'm getting more materials kind of stacking up, so I want to clean those off. And I'm going to add a texture. Now I said I would provide the textures for these, so I will give you an Illustrator file that has my label on there if you want to do this one. You're just updating names and you're updating some of the positioning of things if you want. Every one you do, you will have to save it out as a target image. So if I go to P drive there, I'll open up Illustrator while we're waiting for that. If you're making your own label, make a square image. So I made a 5" by 5" image. Okay, that's fine for Illustrator stuff. Once you're in there, you want to fill the entire thing with what your label is going to be. But keep in mind that even though I have a 5" by 5" document, that my label is not going to be a 5" by 5" label. This is the label that I made, okay? So my label is going to go right here. You can see where those two lines are. That's where my label is set up to be, okay? If I had something that was more vertical, my label may be going the other direction. It may be more like up like this and not down right in the middle, okay? So I made the whole document black because Illustrator saves stuff weird. It would actually like crop it. And so this is what my label will look like. So if I needed to change this description, I could say like peach. Then I'd have to adjust it a little bit. And then I would adjust the apple coloring to be, you know, red or blue or whatever color. Excuse me. Cool. So I'm going to load in my image. It's going to say, do you want to copy it? I'm going to say no, because it should already be copied. I'll have to figure out why that happened. Whatever. So this, I connected this to my luminance. That's a wrong spot to do that. Go to my color and do that. Oh, there we go. Okay, so now it puts it on there. It's obviously not in the correct location. The uplift should be going vertical, and then the apple stuff should be going the other way. So if I click on the material here, I can choose how it's connected. Now we'll get into UV mapping, but for now what we're going to do is just set this to cylindrical. See where it placed it, there it is. And then I'm going to click on this texture box, and this is going to allow me to move and rotate and scale this thing around. So as I rotate, you'll see the texture is rotating. As I scale, you'll see the texture is scaling. So what I need to do is get this thing positioned correctly. What was that? Right here. So I'm just moving and rotating and scaling this until it gets into the right spot. So that looks pretty close to what I had. Okay, so I can switch back to my object mode. I can unsolo my scene. And then I can see there definitely is a little bit more of that coming through. I think it's because my label does not have, it just needs to be a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to go to my scale tool, grab that green scale tool again, and just make it a hair bigger so it doesn't intersect. Okay, now I can go and render it out again and see what this is looking like. And now it looks like that label is sort of kind of on there. It still needs to have some of the properties adjusted, so stuff like reflection I should change this to Beckman. Now, just so you can see, when we're doing this one, we're changing it to Beckman or any of these other ones. We're looking at the reflection. So if I go to GGX or if I go to Beckman, you can see the difference right away. So GGX is going to give me a hard reflection right in the center and then soften it out around the edges, whereas Beckman is basically just this harsh reflection, okay? So I'm actually going to go, for this one, to GGX first, take this down somewhat, and then pull up some reflection. Okay, now again, there's no magical numbers there. Just play with the settings and then go back and tweak. My reflection is way too bright. My label is totally lost. So I have to go through and I have to tweak and adjust and modify that. So I go back to my reflection. Maybe I take my global reflection down a bit. That didn't do anything. Maybe I take my specular strength down. Let's try Beckman on this one. Yeah, in this case, Beckman seems to be working a bit better. Oops, nope, see, I did it. There's too much reflection on there is what's happening. There we go. Okay, now again, I'm not trying to get it perfect. I'm just trying to get a likeness of it. So that seems sufficient for what we're doing. Okay, once I get lights in there, that will change how this is set up. I'm satisfied with the way that looks. All right, now the last thing I'm going to show is how I would do the cap. Let me label these real quick. Apple label. Environment. There we go. And then finally the cap. I'm going to drop it on there, drop it onto here. Now this one is a black cap, so I may choose to go with a black cap. Just to show this for the video, I'm going to go with more of a cream colored cap, like that. Go into my reflection, give it some reflection, but I'm really going to make it rough. So that's looking pretty creamy looking. That's good enough. Okay. So now the one thing that this is missing, are the ridges. If you look at any cap that twists, typically there's like these little ridges that go around. So that's something that we could actually go through and we could model the ridges into each one of the caps. What that does though is it creates more geometry on the cap itself, making it take even longer to render, okay? Also, if we decided we wanted, let's say, 10 more ridges in here or whatever, we'd have to basically remodel the thing. So we're going to do it a bit different. So I'm going to duplicate my oil cap material. I'm going to double-click it, and just for ease of visual seeing, I'm just going to change the color to something crazy. And then I'm going to go to my faces and just, marquee the faces straight across, because that's where my ridges would be. Now, for stuff like the label, for stuff like the cap, if something wasn't lined up with what I wanted it to be lined up with, I can use that knife tool that we used before to add another loop and then create it from there, okay? So if I wanted an extra division in here, I could just go to my knife tool, add a loop, and now I would have another way to separate that, okay? It actually lined up good with where I wanted it. So I'm going to take this and just drop this onto those faces. And so now Cinema will create a selection and assign that material just to that selection. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under my bump for this, and I'm going to go to my textures, and I'm going to do a grid. Okay, so under surfaces, there is a one of these, where'd it go? Normalizer, Luma. Oops, I'm not under a grid. Oh, sorry, it's tiles. Yes, it's tiles, not grid. So under tiles, this is what it looks like. I don't want it to look like that. Luckily, they come with these different patterns. So you can pick lines, which is one of these things. Lines. So I can have lines go this way, lines that go, oops, that's rings. Like that kind of line or like this kind of line, okay? Now for this, we just need something simple like that. So I'm just going to go through and change the colors. What we want is a black and white image. Okay, so now everything is black right there. I'm going to take my grout color and make it white. And if you look here, you can see what it's doing. It's actually creating those little lines for where the cap would be. It's facing the wrong direction on here. If you look at it, the lines are going left and right. The lines are going left and right. I changed this to V, and now they're going up and down. So now when I render this, it's more impressive when it just works, right? Just zoom out a bit, and that'll make it go quicker. There's no sense in being zoomed up on it because I'm never going to be zoomed up. But now you can see that there's lines on here. And this is one of the awesome things about doing it this way is from this far away, you can't tell that I mean, it looks like there's dimples or divots or marks on here. Same thing here. If we're far enough away from it, we can see the impression of these lines, but we don't have to have them look perfect. So I'm going to take these lines now and close this. Go to the arrow here, and if I change my tiles, I believe I changed my tile V, nope, my tile U, yep, there it is. If I make more tiles this way, I'll basically double the count of lines going around it. So if I made it, let's say 4, then I would have probably an appropriate amount of lines going around that cap. Now again, this is green just for the visual. I will put it back to the original color. It will not be green. Okay, so that looks okay. If I go to that material again and I go to the bump, there is a strength. So I can make this strength. Number one, if I take it way up, you'll see that it looks like these lines are actually coming out. I'm going to go the other direction, negative, and have them push in. But if I don't see them pushing in enough, that's where I can really crank up the settings to make it look like it's really pushing it in. That should be good enough. I'm going to adjust my reflection on here too a bit. I think it might be just a bit too rough. More reflection will give us more of those lines being visible. Okay, it'll just be more apparent. That might be too much. Yeah, that's probably too much. All right, well, I can go back and tweak that. All right, so now I'm just going to go to my oil cap, original one. I'm just going to there's no way for me to copy that color, is there? It's weird. $37, $16, $80. There we go. And whatever one's reflection is, the other one has to be the same thing. So, oops. This, that. So for now, I'll just leave it like that. But now that gives me one bottle, it gives me a label on there, and it gives me a cap. Now I could also do on the very top of the bottle, if there's a label there, I could also put a label right there. I'd make a new image, drop it onto that face, and then I would have a label on there as well. Okay? Your goal when you do one item is that you have a group that has all your items inside here. So there's my label. Here is the cap ring. This is the cap. There's the oil bottle cloth. And so now if I decided, hey, I want to make a new one, I can just duplicate it. And the only thing I would really need to change is that material on here. So if I created a brand new texture, let's just say for fun I did the peach. And of course I'd want to adjust this so that it fits. Don't tell Chris that I just stretched that. Yes, sir. Yes, I can show that. I won't show that today. You can just use a stand-in one, or if you get to that point, I'll go over that. Yeah. Oops. Now, ideally, you can use the internet as a resource for, what should things look like, but you should never grab something off of there and use it for your own, because you want to get in the habit of creating everything that is yours, right? So if I go to a company and they say, I want you to make this model, and here it is, you would just go and build all the assets. You'd want to be able to go in there and build all the pieces. But there's nothing wrong with using it to say, what does a label look like? Peach label, there it is. What? How are you being used by something else? Oh. It just wanted me to save it again. There we go. All right, so now that I have two bottles, here's my old bottle one. All I have to do is go in here, there's my label, and I just drop my new label onto that label, and now I have a new one. Okay, so that's the idea with doing something like that, where it's very easy to go and change the label, and then boom, you would have a brand new item that you could have inside your scene. Think about, even at the very early stages of this, think about what your product is going to look like. Photography. Right? We are not at the level of being able to do fluids, so just throw those out of your brain. Don't even worry about that. Something like this is pretty simple to do. There's a label on here. There's some sort of gooey mess running down, and they've even done it a bunch here, apparently. That's way too complex for what we're doing.
So are all those like makeup shots usually like done in 3D?
Yes.
Like they're not real color?
There's most of the stuff that you see, if not fully 3D, has some 3D in there.
What about like the crushed ones? So they have like broken
Yep.
makeup?
Let me go to my thing here.